Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for taking time out of your busy schedule to join us for the third and final webinar in advance of ECA Legislative Action Day. Today, we're going to be doing a deep dive into the policy issues that we will be talking about 1 week from today on Capitol Hill. We're going to talk a little bit about visa delays and our next generation workforce today. As everybody knows, this time next week, we will all be in Washington, D.C. on Capitol Hill for ECA Legislative Action Day. We appreciate all of you taking time out of your busy schedule to be with us in Washington, D.C. that day. I know over the last couple of weeks, we've had some opportunities to connect about what to expect that day and to talk about congressional meeting best practices. And so I thank you all for joining us as we talk some of the policy issues today. Up on your screen, you will see a QR code there. And if you're looking for any of the resources related to Legislative Action Day, just hit that QR code. It will take you to a page on the ECA website where you will find everything from recordings of the previous webinars, the one-page sheets you'll be using on Capitol Hill, a copy of our meeting outline and talking points, and all other kinds of resources. So everything that you've gotten from me, either via email or through these webinars previously, all in one place where you can find all of the good information that we've had previously. Before we get started, I will also just pass along that later on today, you'll get the final Know Before You Go email from me with updates about everything from congressional meeting scheduling to some of the day of logistics. Take a look at that email. But of course, if there's any questions or anything that you don't see there, please give me an email or call. I think all of you have my contact information, and we're happy to get you any of the answers that you need in advance of next Thursday. Also want to take a moment to thank our wonderful sponsors who are making Legislative Action Day possible. We cannot do this without the support of the wonderful organizations that you see on the screen there. And we very humbly thank them for their leadership and support in helping us to deliver ECA Legislative Action Day. So let's begin. I want to introduce, with all of these webinars, I don't want you all to have to hear me talk for half an hour. So I've been honored to lean on some of our experts and friends within the business events advocacy realm. And I think this sector has no better friend than our guest today, Elizabeth Mayer, who is a policy director at Brownstein Hyatt Farber Schreck, which is ECA's Public Policy Council. Elizabeth has been a friend to this industry for many years now. She actually predates my involvement with ECA back in its very, very formative times. She is a longtime Capitol Hill staffer, worked in the Senate and House in very senior leadership roles, and since that point in time has been on the private sector side of the House, helping organizations like ECA more effectively advocate on Capitol Hill. So Elizabeth, welcome. Thank you very much for spending some time with us today.
Oh, you're very welcome. I'm very happy to be with you.
Well,
I actually was, we did a fundraiser for Senator Kramer the other day, Republican from North Dakota, but his chief of staff and LD and I got in a big conversation about what it was like working during the pandemic. And so I explained about when it was called Go Live. And they were just amazed at the just how bad it was trying to get back to where we are now and educating people about our sector. And so you know, they didn't have as big an effect as we did here in DC and all of the folks who were then part of Go Live. But anyway, suffice it to say, I am very happy we aren't in that situation right now. And we can talk about other issues.
You have been on quite the journey with this industry over the last 4+ years. One of the reasons I wanted to have you on here today is, nobody has their finger on the pulse of what's happening on Capitol Hill quite like you and your colleagues do. And so maybe let's just start the conversation before we get into some of the policy details. Let's just talk about the political context up on Capitol Hill for maybe just a moment or two. This is kind of a Congress unlike any other in a lot of different ways. Tell me, kind of just paint the broad picture of what is the environment that folks who are watching this today going to be walking into on May 30th?
Well, luckily for us, we're going to be going up during a little bit quieter time, which actually is going to benefit us because otherwise, I feel like if our fly-in was this week, we would have had a lot of cancellations because they're trying to pass stuff, trying to get out of town. Um, it'll be quiet, but and depending on the office that you go to, people are very nervous about their elections. I will say that. And that really does trickle down to the staff, believe it or not, even though we don't remember mix campaign talk with issues because that's illegal. But people are just really tired and they're frustrated about the pace of accomplishments for this Congress. Having said that, Representative Scalise did come out a couple days ago with a pretty ambitious agenda for getting some appropriations and otherwise, defense and other bills done through the summer. But people are not quite convinced that they believe that those things are going to actually get done. So a lot might happen in what's called the lame duck, which is after the elections when everyone knows what's going on. And even some of our priorities, believe it or not, might get done, even though they aren't controversial in some ways, they might get done in lame duck. So we just have to be very flexible and be able to pivot. Last thing I'll say is just be aware that, your majority friend today in the Senate might be your minority friend tomorrow, because the Senate, while it's Democratic now, could flip to being Republican controlled next year. No one really thinks it will be above 51 votes. Even Senator Kramer said that in the fundraiser the other day. So that'll still make it tough. And the House might go to Democratic control. And then I won't even get into the presidential race. I'll leave that all to you all to talk about that amongst yourselves.
We will take a pass on talking about the presidential race, and instead let's go into one of the issues that we will be talking about on Legislative Action Day. And for those who were with us last year, we had our visa processing delays as one of our critical issues that we addressed. And I think as for those who were with us last year may remember, as we sat here 12 months ago, we had some pretty serious visa delays around the world. It was almost universally bad. And our Legislative Action Day ask was to get Congress to, introduce a piece of legislation, just to take a leadership role in terms of helping us solve this visa delay issue. And it has been a pretty remarkable 12 months as it comes down to changes that we have seen when it comes to visa issues. First and foremost, the delays have gotten significantly better around the world. I think when we sat here last year, Brazil, which is one of our top inbound markets where a visa is required, was around 460 days on average to get a visa interview. These days, it's less than 50. China is still in a very good situation. I believe they're at around 2 months right now. Definitely some manageable times. But as you see up on the screen, there are some markets that are still incredibly problematic. Mexico has gotten significantly worse. You're probably looking bare minimum at 2 years to get a visa interview appointment right now. India, Middle East, Latin America, some other regions, we still have these pockets of trouble. And so that's why we're coming back to talk about visas again this year, despite the fact that a couple of months ago, when government spending bills were passed for fiscal year 2024, we were successful in securing $50 million for the State Department to dedicate solely toward these visa delay backlogs, which is absolutely wonderful news. The news that wait times are going down in key markets is still very good. It's a positive step in the right direction, but there's a lot more to be done. We really want to solve this problem, not only for what we're facing right now, but also ensure that it never happens again. And so there are some bills out there in Congress, 3 of them actually. Last year we asked for 1. There are 3 different bills out there on Capitol Hill right now that could increase flexibility, transparency, and accountability within the State Department. And Elizabeth, do you want to weigh in on some of those and maybe some of the details behind them?
Sure. I mean, I think you'll agree with me, Tommy. I think, the main bill is still the Klobuchar Moran bill, which is a bill that got introduced a while back, and it's pending in the Senate. And that bill would require the State Department to develop benchmarks for improvements in visa processing times. It would also, on the operational side, allow for greater opportunities for pilot programs and video conferencing, as well as allowing for the waiver of certain in-person interviews for or certain visas. And then it would also allow for individuals to extend their visitor visas. And so that bill, while not controversial, is going to take some, and we are doing our education, it's going to take some education of some members who just don't like change in this area, and they're always very fearful of potential sort of national security effects, like Senator Grassley, et cetera. He's very hardline on some of these issues. So we're doing due diligence to educate people about it. And we'll see. It could be one of those things that gets tacked on maybe to a funding bill at the end of the year, or a bigger, State Department authorization bill. But it remains to be seen. It's one of those things where the leader in the Senate and the Speaker in the House aren't dedicating enough floor time yet to it.
No, that's a very good point. And one of the things you just heard from Elizabeth, and I'm kind of going back to her point about the political environment, is if you look at the menu of these three bills that you see on the screen, and to get more details about them, take a look at the meeting notes and talking points document that you may have either received from me directly or have received from your state leader, who's going to be coordinating the work of your state group on Legislative Action Day. It's got some more details about these pieces of legislation. But as Elizabeth mentioned, this is one of the least productive Congresses on record in terms of taking and passing individual bills. And as Elizabeth just alluded to, a lot of the work that may happen, a lot of the successes we may have, may involve taking parts of some of these bills and having them be part of a much larger vehicle that incorporates significantly more. That's where we had some success with our visa funding issue earlier this year. And so while we'll be going around and asking congressional offices to co-sponsor these pieces of legislation, which is their way of signaling their support for it, we do understand that the likelihood of any of these bills passing solo, kind of in that traditional I'm just a bill way that you all may have remembered from Schoolhouse Rocks, it's probably going to be a little bit more murky than that. And these provisions may get attached onto something else. So there are lots of different pathways for some of the things that we're looking for to become law. So if someone in one of these meetings says, well, they're not really passing a lot of visa bills this year, you could certainly say, yeah, that's absolutely right. But there are pieces of this that could ride with something else. So it's important to remember that there are a variety of different opportunities here for some of these bills to become law, because as Elizabeth mentioned, anytime you're talking about visa, for us, it's a business issue. On Capitol Hill, it's often viewed as an immigration issue. And as you all probably know just from watching the news, anytime you talk about immigration in politics, everybody kind of goes to their corners, and it becomes a very, very significant problem. So we really are talking about the business impact. Don Klein asked a good question here about highlighting, for members that, may have had challenges on our issues and know who we're talking to is friendly. One of the things that you all will get in advance of Legislative Action Day is, as your meetings are scheduled, you're going to get biographies of each of these members of Congress, and you will see in the notes sections, we can flag whether they're sponsors of our bill, whether they're particular supporters of different policies. So we'll make sure you have all the information you need before going into these conversations so that you know kind of exactly where these members of Congress stand on these important issues that we're talking about. So great question, Dawn. Thank you.
It is a great question. And one quick thing I would add is, there are a lot of freshman members in the House and even some freshman senators, even though they make their views known a lot more. But there might be an opportunity, it's perfect timing, to get in before someone hardens their position one way or the other, and they haven't really said anything publicly. This is the time to, for those folks who haven't really, they just haven't worked on this that much, they're new, to educate them. So it's a great opportunity.
I think that's a very good point. I saw quite a startling statistic recently that slightly more than half of the House of Representatives has been in office for less than 2 terms right now. So that's less than 4
my
years.
goodness.
So a lot of the folks that, for those of you who used to come on Exhibitions Day, more than half of those members pre-pandemic aren't here anymore. And so there's a lot of education, a lot of opportunity for all of you to tell your stories and talk about how not only this issue, but the workforce issues are impacting folks on the ground. So definitely keep that in mind. Nancy asked a great question about making sure we provide that information. All of the state leads will have a folder on Legislative Action Day that will have copies of all the one-page documents, as well as paper copies of the biographies with the information on who's sponsoring some of these bills and the like. So we will make sure everybody has that information printed out for them and ready to go next Thursday. So Nancy, thank you very much for that question. Let's pivot for just a moment and talk about our future workforce. And, I haven't been in the industry all that long, but I think for most of my time here, I don't think I've had many conversations with a lot of the names and faces on today's call where workforce concerns haven't absolutely been front and center. And last year, we spoke about workforce and 2 particular issues that we have an interest in terms of getting the government to come in and be a partner with us on helping to attract and train our next generation workforce. One of those bills would be involved in expanding the Pell Grant program and letting skilled workforce training be part of that. We'll talk a little bit more about that here in a moment. And another bill talked about expanding what you could use 529 college savings plans for. So things like training and certification. And for those of you who were with us last year, we're going to be talking about the exact 2 things this year. But as I mentioned with the visas, quite a lot has changed since folks were here with us for Legislative Action Day in 2023. On the Pell Grant side, the House of Representatives Committee that has jurisdiction over that, the Education and Workforce Committee, passed out a bill that would expand Pell Grant access and allow skilled workforce training to be included for the first time. That passed on a 44-3 bipartisan vote, which is really quite remarkable and shows that Democrats and Republicans alike kind of share our interest in making sure that people get the skills training they need to have great careers. The Senate, since I actually put the slide together, we now have 50 co-sponsors, so that's half the Senate. Has expressed an interest in our Pell Grant bill, which is wonderful news. And we understand that there might be a hearing on that bill next month, which is really quite fantastic. And on the 529 side, you can see from the screen, we've added more than 100 co-sponsors to the House of Representatives bill. Credit to the Tomorrow's Workforce Coalition.
That's really that does not happen every day. That is very significant. So
it is
we're on a roll.
Absolutely remarkable. It is remarkable, and there's a lot of momentum behind these issues. And you can see, so co-sponsors are increasing. We're part of a coalition that has more than 800 members. I don't know if Jeff Evans is with us today, but he's doing a great job at ASAE heading up that coalition. So a lot of really, really positive momentum coming through here. And we're going to try to keep that momentum up on Legislative Action Day by talking about these 2 important pieces of legislation. Elizabeth, what can you tell us about these 2 particular bills that we're looking at, the Pell Grant opportunities as well as the 529 expansion?
Well, in a nutshell, what I'll say is that the House bill, the Pell Grant bill, passed out of committee. It's completely bipartisan, a very, I guess I would say conservative. Well, she's more of a populist, but conservative House member, Virginia Fox and Bobby Scott from the Norfolk area of Virginia. They have banded together to come to support something together, which is very difficult to do in the House. And then the bill on the Senate side, which is Tim Kaine and Mike Braun. And Mike Braun's, pretty conservative, but he's also very pragmatic. And so they have this bill that would allow for the usage of Pell Grants for shorter term, non-traditional non-4-year opportunities for education. And Senator Kaine just wants to get it done. We had a lengthy Tommy and I meeting with his office. So we don't know where the chips will actually end up falling. Will it be the House bill that passes into law? Will it be the Senate bill? I don't really think Senator Kaine cares. He's such a nice person. But I do think there's a chance, and a good chance, that bill might pass. There was a dust up over what's called the pay for, how you pay for it. We think that's getting resolved. There was some sort of kickback with some of the institutions of higher learning because of the pay for, and some of our union friend folks, there were things about it that they didn't like, but overall it is a non-controversial bill. Tommy, wouldn't you say? And I think it has a decent chance of passing into law.
I think that's right. I think anytime you can get Congress to pass something on a 44-3 vote that doesn't involve determining what day of the week it is, I think it's very, very good in this political climate.
Or naming a post office.
Right. That's kind of the areas of consensus these days. But our next generation workforce is one of those areas where people still have a lot of interest. The reason that we're focused in particularly on the Pell Grant program is last year, America spent $24.1 billion on Pell Grants. And those all went to folks who were taking semester-based college classes. But if you think about some of the folks we need in our industry, carpenters, electricians, riggers, forklift drivers, the list just goes on and on. You can provide some very, very high quality training in an 8-week period, which is what this legislation would do. It would drop the time requirement from 15 to 8. You can get some licenses, some micro certifications on the back of it, and have folks who are coming into the industry with the skills that we are so thirsty for and that we need so badly out on the show floor. So that's a story that's definitely resonating with members of Congress. And so I agree with Elizabeth. The right kind of things are happening to make sure that this gets passed by the end of the year.
Yeah, the one thing I will say, just to add on to what Tommy's saying, is that most of these senators and House members, whether they're Republican or Democrat or independent, Angus King from Maine, although he huddles with the Democrats for leadership and things like that, is that these members get it. I mean, I don't know why this bill didn't pass yesterday. They really understand that people cannot find and keep a qualified workforce. And so, so Tommy said it all, but I do think you're going to get good reception on the workforce issues.
No, this is definitely something that has quite a bit of traction on Capitol Hill. Elizabeth mentioned, that there was a particular way to pay for the legislation that has since been removed, that she mentioned. And if you take a look at the meeting outline and talking points document that you all should have received, and if you don't have it at hand or don't have it in your email box, check the email you'll get from me later on today. We'll make sure that's included as part of that message. And what you'll see there is we've got some pieces of that to kind of outline that meeting script, whatever you want to call it, that point out some questions that you might get asked. One of them is about, how you would pay for this particular piece of legislation. That's Congress's business. That's not ours. We want you to focus on telling your story and highlighting where we think some of these policies can help, but we really don't want to get dragged down into that kind of debate, right? That's nothing that the industry doesn't have a point of view on. We're not interested in that part of it. What we're interested in is getting this bill across the finish line and getting folks the training they need. So you might see a couple little blurbs on your meeting script that say, just if asked, kind of a way to sort of explain that away. And as I think we mentioned on a previous webinar, if you all are asked any questions about the details, the nuts and the bolts of this legislation that you don't know, hey, I don't know, but I'm happy to have ECA staff follow up with you, is an absolutely perfect answer to those questions. The folks you're going to be meeting with are not expecting you to be policy experts. They're expecting you to tell them what's happening on the ground in their states and congressional districts. That's what these conversations are for. And so if anybody throws you a question, about the details of the bill, that's kind of a little bit of a curveball, just let them know that I'm happy to follow up with them. Elizabeth's happy to follow up with them, and we'll get them the information we need. But we really want them to stay focused on what the industry needs and your story. So that, in a nutshell, are the two issues that we'll be talking about on workforce and on visas. I know we're getting at least somewhat close to the end of our time today, so I do want to keep things on time. But again, as I mentioned earlier, if you have any questions or looking for any of the resources, including that meeting script that we were just talking about, you can take a picture of this QR code right now. It'll take you to a page on the ECA website, and we'll be happy to make sure you get all the resources that you need. A couple more minutes open for questions. So if anybody has any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. But as you do, I want to kind of give you a little bit of a preview of what to expect from ECA over the next couple of days in the run-up to Legislative Action Day. First off, you're going to get an email from me later on today, kind of one of those weekly know before you go emails that you've been getting. This is going to be the last one. This should have all the information you need, everything from the logistics of the day, where to be and when, to dress code, weather, anything you could possibly think of for the day. Hopefully we've got covered in that email. If there's anything you don't see answered, of course, please do reach out. We'll make sure we get the information that you need to you. If you do have any questions, if you've read all this information, if you've been part of these webinars and you still have a couple of burning questions, or maybe you're joining us for the first time and just kind of want to learn a little bit more, you will see in that email later on today, there is a link to join what we're calling our virtual office hours tomorrow from 1 to 4 p.m. Eastern. Drop in at any time during that period. I will be on here to answer any questions you have, to chat about any of these issues, to answer questions, get you details, whatever you need. Just 3-hour block tomorrow. You can do it anytime during that period. You'll see a link to that in today's email. And then finally, on Tuesday morning, you will get an email from a group called Advocacy Associates. And what Advocacy Associates is they are the firm that provides what's called the Advocacy Day app that we will be using on Legislative Action Day. It'll direct you to the App Store, either Apple or Android, whatever you have, and we'll invite you to download that app. What you'll do is you'll pop that app open once it's downloaded. You will look for Exhibitions and Conferences Alliance. You'll click on that. You'll enter your email. And as soon as you do that, voila, your meeting schedule for all of your congressional meetings will pop up in that app. And if you're like me and you silence all the notifications on this thing, I would just encourage you, leave notifications for at least 2 days up on that app, because what you see on Tuesday and any meeting changes that happen between Tuesday and Thursday, the app will automatically update those for you. So do check it out a couple of times a day. You might see that, maybe a time was moved here or there, or maybe some new meetings were added. Unlike all of us on this line, the folks on Capitol Hill tend to schedule meetings very, very close and very, very last minute. And I can tell you, as somebody who's done this for 25 years, it drives me nuts to this day. But I promise meeting scheduling will probably be happening up until the morning of Legislative Action Day. So check out that app. You will see that, meeting times will vary here and there. And once you've got those meeting schedules, you'll probably get an email from me on Tuesday with the biographies of all the folks that you'll be meeting with. So it'll talk about, what parties they're on, what committees they're part of, and all of those bios. If you turn to the last page of them, you'll see there's a field that will show where they're supporting legislation that we just talked about, where they're co-sponsors. Some of them are even leading it, And so you'll be able to know going into the meeting where that member of Congress stands on the issues that we've identified. And know that, for example, if let's say they co-sponsored both the workforce bills, you really don't need to go into that part that much, other than maybe just thanking them for their support and telling them that it's really important for us that they're on those bills. But we'll get you all the background information you need ahead of time. Those schedules will start popping up on your phones on Tuesday morning. And like I said, there'll just be some evolution here and there between now and Thursday, but we're here to answer any questions in the meantime. So with that, I did my best, but I ran us 1 minute over. I just want to thank Elizabeth Mayer from Brownstein Hyatt Farbershek, who's not only our policy counsel and really the first lady of the industry's advocacy work on Capitol Hill, but she is actually going to be hosting us for our kickoff event on Thursday. It will be at their offices, and we can't wait to see everybody there. It is going to be, I think we've got more than 130 folks slated to join us. It's going to be the biggest gathering of the industry on Capitol Hill ever. And I just want to take the time to thank you all for being part of it and joining us. So until next week, keep an eye open for your email. You'll be hearing from me a couple of times between now and then. But if you've got any questions, stop by the office hours, shoot me a message. And otherwise, a week from today, we look forward to seeing everybody on Capitol Hill. Thanks for being with us today, everybody. Take care.
Can't wait to see you guys. Bye.